Welcome to JHart Modelworks. In this video we will be completely rebuilding the shocks for the Hasegawa Lamborghini Miura SV. Welcome to my workbench. Let's get started. So in the 928 series last year I did a video called Building Better Brakes, in which I took some photo etch and some soda can aluminum and some resin calipers, and I completely rebuilt the brake system on the 928 to get a much better look. This build we're also going to do a video, and I'm going to call this one Building Better Shocks. Now looking at our kit parts here, these were actually really clean on one side, but on the other side, right in the middle, there's this ejector pin mark. Now I'm not sure why, but every manufacturer for some reason puts an ejector pin mark right in the middle of the springs. They all do it. The easiest fix for this would of course be to go in and kind of sand the edges and then add just a tiny bit of super glue across where that spring should be, kind of sand it up, clean it up, and call it good. But of course we're not going to do that because that would be the easy fix. Instead, we're going to slice and dice and do some surgery and make some better looking shocks. To do this, we're going to need some things. We're going to use our hobby knife. We use some sanding and filing implements. So I'm going to use some stick sanders as well as some metal files. We're going to use our pin vise and some drill bits. We're going to use some super glue. We'll use some metal rod. I'm going to be using the K&S number 8100. This is the 1/16 inch, or about 1.6 millimeter outer diameter. That's the aluminum tubing. We're also going to use some K&S number 501 music wire. This is, I guess it's 0.032 inch. I always go by millimeters, it's just easier for me, so this is about 0.8 millimeters. And this fits very nicely inside our aluminum tubing. Now, when I get ballpoint pens and they die, before I throw them away, I scavenge the springs out of them. So I have a whole bunch of these springs. The ballpoint pen springs are typically about 4 millimeters in outer diameter. Now these particular shocks are a little, and normally the 4 millimeter stuff is perfect. Normally that's right size, especially on like muscle cars and things like that. Usually 4 millimeters is perfect. We'll need a ruler as well, because we're going to do some measuring. But these are right at 3 millimeters. Measure here. And so I have from Amazon, I've got some 3 millimeter outer diameter by 10 millimeter springs. I'll keep these around just in case I get some of these smaller ones where the 4 millimeter stuff from the ballpoint pens won't work. And these are actually really cool because when I do some measuring here in a little bit, you're going to see that the particular springs that we're replacing, I'll find it in a second, are 10 millimeters in length. So these aren't going to require to be cut at all. They're just going to slide fit right in. And finally, you should always have something to drink. I'm going to be enjoying some black cherry Zevia soda. So now that we got all our supplies, let's get started. Alright, so we have our part. We've cleaned up a little bit of flash on here, and we are ready to get started. First thing we want to do is take some measurements. So the first measurement we're going to get is going to be the outer diameter of the spring. I know I've done this during the materials video. I'm going to do it again. We're looking right at about 3 millimeters there. And then we're going to take a measurement from the inside of the spring area. We're looking right at 10 millimeters. So looking at our spring, I'm not throwing our spring on the ground. We have a 3 millimeter spring outer diameter, and we have a 10 millimeter spring length. So that's going to be perfect. A lot of times I end up cutting the springs. This time I'm not going to need to. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the top and bottom very carefully. I put my finger over the end of the piece so it doesn't go flying off. That's going to be our top. And we're just going to clean that up a little bit. Set that aside over here. And we're literally just getting right on that edge of that area. I start with an area that doesn't have the spring in it. So that I know I'm right on the end of the cap. Just real gentle. I find the easiest way to do this is to just rock it back and forth under the blade until the blade slides through. And we have our bottom. And we're just going to clean that up as well. We'll start with our 0.3 millimeter bit. We're going to start with our bottom here because it's going to be the easier of the two. We want to put a hole right in the center of this, but we also want to make sure that our hole stays in the area Let's go through here. Don't want to drill deep, I don't want to risk going through the other side. And while I'm drilling, I turn the part periodically just to make sure that I'm centered still in the center of the shaft area for that part. That's going to give us our start. Finally, we're going to be at our 0.8 millimeter bit. Just test fit that a little bit, make sure that's going to fit. Just a dab. just a dab of super glue on the end there. One tool I did forget to mention is a marker. Use a permanent marker here. And what we want is about 7 millimeters. We don't want 10. If we did 10, we wouldn't be able to compress it at all. Actually, about 6. I normally say about 7 millimeters, but that is including the millimeter or so that I glue inside the head. So once it's glued in like that, you can just go ahead and measure about 6 millimeters. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Take some wire cutters. And usually I will use my rotary tool because it cuts through better, but there we go. That's a little long. We're going to clean it up anyhow. So hopefully by the time we get done filing it, it'll be where we want it. We'll want to just sand all around the edge just to make sure there's no burrs in it that'll keep it from sliding in and out of our tubing. And we're going to flatten that sharp point off at the end. That's got us pretty close. Alright. So that is the bottom half of our shock. We're going to do the same thing to the top half, but we have to be really careful because we don't have a whole lot of neck. And we have to get about 1.6 millimeters in here of space. That's got us about right where we want. We are a little off center, so we did get a little bit past where we wanted to be, but it is survivable. For the tubing, I'm going to go ahead and mark it and cut it before I glue it in place, because that's going to make it easier to cut. It's much harder to cut if you've already got it glued in. And we're going to do about 6 millimeters. Doing 6 is going to give us a little bit of overlap on each side, so everything will slide into each other, but at the same time it's going to give us a little bit of room to compress. Just take your blade and put pressure on the blade and carefully roll your tubing. Don't push hard or you'll crunch the tubing, or you will shoot the tubing off into outer space where you will never see it again. Go ahead and test fit the tubing to our bottom to make sure everything still slides back and forth. put a touch of super glue on here and glue this in place. And we want to make sure that this is as straight as we can get it. We're going to do a quick test assembly. We'll take one of our springs. Outer spring is going to go on the outside like this. Inner spring will go on the center. Or our inner post will go on the center. And that's going to be basically the gist of it. Now this is going to be, and it's perfectly fine, it may not be the exact same length. As long as it's not a lot longer than the original part, you're good. See, we're pretty darn close. We're a little long, but because this is compressible, we're going to be able to compress it back into the proper length when we go to assemble it into the kit. So I'm going to take everything apart again. We're going to make sure everything's nice and cured. Then I'm going to throw some paint on here and I'll be back for the final result. Alright guys, we are back from paint. We have our top, our bottom, and our spring. But something I did forget to mention while I was building was when you go to do your test fit, if it does not fit in here, when you go to do your test fit, if this does not slide inside properly, like that, then you may need to open this up. And there's two ways to do this. You can use your drill bits to just very gently drill in there, or you can take a metal file, something with a nice sharp point. Get that point on the edge. And spin the file on the inside so that it cleans up that center. And that'll let you get to where you can slide your center in. No problems. I do typically prefer to use the drill bits if I can. Sometimes you get a little glue inside or something, and the drill bit will just reach down in there. You don't want to use anything large, like a 0.8 millimeter, maybe a 0.9 millimeter if you're still having trouble. 0.9 will get in there, but all in all, you should be set to go. Now what we're going to do is our final assembly on this piece. I'm going to take one end of my spring. And the way I painted the spring, I keep old Altoid tins and whatnot, but I just put down a piece of two-sided, double-sided sticky tape, and I stuck the spring straight up like that, and this little 3M double-sided tape, before you paint it, is sticky enough to hold it as long as you're not using a whole lot of real high air pressure, getting real close with the airbrush. So that is going to leave me with one side that is not painted. I'm just going to carefully dip that into some super glue. I'm going to take a toothpick and just make sure there's no, because I don't want to get any super glue on the actual post itself. I'm going to very carefully slide that over my center post. I'm going to let that cure. if you want, you could hit that with a little bit of some like Insta-set. So I'm going to call it kicker, but I'm just going to go ahead and let that sit. So you see down in there, you got your hole. You want to take your post. Make sure you get the post inside your socket. And there you go. Now, if you want to, you can glue the bottom side, and that's not going to be a problem. I am not, and the reason why I don't glue the bottom is because the spring is going to hold itself in place anyhow. And I found that when I go to mount this, I can get this bottom part glued into its little slot where it goes, and I can kind of twist and turn this as I need to make sure that I can line this up and get it lined up properly. If there's, if I accidentally glue it and it's glued at an angle like that, then I'm going to have all sorts of problems and end up breaking it apart. And again, to glue it back in place and get it glued in properly into the body. Whereas if I leave it loose, then I can just make sure that I can just twist the top as needed to get it lined up and put everything put in place, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. Also, because this is compressible, even if this is a little bit longer than the original kit part, you can smush it into place and get it where it needs to go. So here we have our part compared to the kit part. And I think that's a fairly significant improvement in my opinion. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Also, feel free to leave comments, feedback, critique, or anything else in the comment section below. I enjoy interacting with all my viewers in the comment section and try to reply to all the comments I receive. If you want to catch future videos, please consider subscribing to my channel and make sure you click the bell notification icon so you can be notified when I upload new videos. As always, thank you for watching, keep modeling, and have a great day.